Hi guys, Jo here and welcome to the Time for Tea Designs YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking you through the card that I made here using the Happy Cat Mum Day digi stamp, which was part of the Time for Tea Designs February release. I'm also going to be using the Wonderful Waves Stencil set that's part of the Amazing Friends collection that's available through Create and Craft. So first of all, I printed out my digital image onto super smooth paper. This is around 120 GSM weight paper, is perfect for using my Copic markers with and goes through my printer easily. When I'm stamping with clear stamps, I may use a heavier cardstock, but for digital stamps this paper works beautifully. I also get a really good blend with my markers, so I will be listing all of the products that I use throughout this tutorial on the accompanying blog post, but also in the description box accompanying this video. So you can see there the colours that I've used to colour up the skin of my little girl image. This image is one whole image, so there's no masking required. All of the cats in their different poses are already part of the image, and when you receive your digital stamps, you will receive the PNG image, the JPEG version as well, so that you can actually layer up more of those images if you wanted to in your own software. So I've just coloured the skin there, and I'm moving on to the hair. The colours that I've used are at the side of the screen, and I always start with the lightest of my colours. I know some people start dark and then move through to light. I've never really been comfortable doing that. I probably do that with very small images, but when I've got a large area to cover, I do like to put a layer of my lightest colour onto my paper first, just to saturate that so that I can get a more perfect blend. So I've gone in with my E13 and I'm now using a flicking motion with my marker. I'm working my way through the colours as they get darker. I'm applying the darkest of the shade right to the tips of her hair, and also where there would be shadow behind her head. So just leaving the centre portions much lighter, and that creates the illusion of light and dimension. The other good thing about this image is that there are the lines in her hair which give you a little bit of guidance as to where that shading should be. It also helps give the illusion of shading so that you don't have to add all of that with your pens. The next stage of the colouring is to move on to her clothing, and this tends to be the way that I colour all of my images. I start with the skin and the hair and then move on to clothing and then any other accessories, and in this image the cats will be the accessories. So just like I did with the hair, I've started with my layer of VO1, which is my lightest shade, and I've done the whole of her top in that first shade, and then using my darker shades, the V12, the V15 and VO9, to then add some dimension just where I feel that her body would be in shadow from the cat and the way that her arm is bent. I've then also moved on to colouring up her jeans, and this is my favourite combination for jeans. B93, B95 and B97 I think works perfectly, and again I've just gone in with that lighter shade, the B93, to apply the colour to all of her legs, and then using the darkest colours just to apply that shadow. And I'm just using really small light flicking motions and just applying a tiny bit of colour so as not to saturate too much of the paper and then that bleed onto the rest of my paper. So moving to the top cat, there, just a really simple bit of colouring using the YR68 to create spots and then a little bit of dimension with my E13. I do then eventually move in with the C3 just to apply a little bit of shading around the tail and around the head. And then the next cat that I went to, I stuck with the orange or ginger theme and moved to this bottom kitty and used my YR31 just to create a little bit of initial colour, leaving a white patch around the nose and mouth and around those front paws, and then applied a little bit of the darker shade of YR15 there to create a little bit of dimension and also a few stripes around the head. But I felt that because the image was small, that it was getting saturated, so I've left that and moved on to my black cat. So now my black cat is just made up of the T3, T5 and T7 colours, and again I've applied 2 layers of that, left that to dry and moved back to my ginger cat, using those little triangle stripes to give the dimension of the illusion of I suppose the tiger stripes of a tabby cat. And now I can move on back to my black cat to apply that darker shade without it being too saturated and it bleeding out onto the rest of my image. So just working those 2 images side by side, doing a couple of layers and moving on to the next one. Don't feel you have to do all of your image in one go. Allowing a little bit of time for it to dry really helps. So the image in the girl's arms will be my grey spotted cat, and I'm using C1, C3 and C5. For all of my images I've used the R32 to apply a little bit of cheek colour, and I've also used that for the pads of the cat's feet, and also if there are any ears visible, that's the colour that I tend to use for that as well. So now we've got our little cat in the box, and for the box I'm using the E13 to give my base layer, and then moving in with my E15 to apply my shading. And what I think is a really cool look is to apply that triangle stripe across the middle of the box, just so that it gives the illusion that it might be a little bit crushed and a little bit bent. And because I needed to let that dry a little bit, I've moved on to applying the base level of colour to my chocolate cat that's peering out from behind the little girl's legs. And then we have our grey cats. So again, just using a really light base layer on that grey cat there, and then some stripes with the darker grey, again to create the tabby effect. And for my white cat, I didn't want him to be completely white. I have just used the palest of the grey colours there, just to apply a little bit of shading so that he didn't look one-dimensional. But I've blended that out using my blender and also applied a little bit of pink to his cheeks. And the blender does really help. Just apply a little bit of alcohol to the paper so that you don't get a too bright a colour there, and it just diffuses the colour ever so slightly. The yarn then is in the same purple shades that we used on the little girl's top, and as I mentioned before, I'm just applying a little bit of shadow to each of the cats where I felt it was needed, using the C3 brush there. And then the cat's sweater will bring in a different colour here, just to add a little bit of vibrancy and a little bit of extra colour to the image. There are a lot of colours with the cats, but they all complement each other, and I felt that it needed something that was a little bit less neutral and something that just really popped on the page. So the YG13 and YG17 really helped with that, and just sticking to the 2 colours because they're only small images helped with the possibility of bleeding. My butterflies are in the V01 and V12, and again very small, so I didn't need to apply a lot of colour there. And then my fish, you'd use the same colours that I used on my ginger kitty, which is the YR31, YR15 and YR68. Again, very small images, so not a great deal of colouring required. and I'm just using my blender there just to again diffuse that that B00 so that it looked more translucent. And then the finishing touches are to apply a little bit of my white jelly roll pen, and I like to apply that across the hair curve, because that gives the illusion of light shining off her hair and gives her a really shiny look to her hair. And then just applied that to various points in the image just to give the illusion of some highlights. So that's the completed image. That's that all coloured, and I did fussy cut that out. The sentiment at the bottom does come as part of the digi stamp set, but I didn't use that in this particular card. So now we're just going to create our background, and I've cut out a rectangle stitched piece of cardstock using some nesting dies, and they will be listed, like I say, in the accompanying blog post. And I'm using a couple of Distress Oxide inks, the Broken China and Salty Ocean, to create two backgrounds, because one will form the back of the panel where the shaker element will live, and then the other will be the frame along the front where my acetate will be attached. So I want them both to blend in, to appear to be one scene. So I'm creating two of the same sort of background and using the different distress inks to build up a sky effect. I've not gone all the way down to the bottom of my panel because I know I'm going to be covering that up with some grass later on. So I've given a base layer of the Broken China and blended that in using my blending tool, and now I'm going around the edges and just applying some of that Salty Ocean to create more of a blue sky. And each layer that I apply, the blend looks much smoother. This is super smooth cardstock, so again this is a heavier weight than the paper that I used for my digi image, but the Distress Oxides really blend really well onto this type of card. So now I've got my two background pieces completed. I'm just cleaning up my areas so that I don't get any of that ink on anywhere else onto my card. And now I'm just spraying both of them with water. This is just drops of water that I'm just spraying randomly onto my background, and then using a bit of paper towel just to soak that up. And for speed, I've just used my heat tool to dry each of those, and I just think that gives a really nice effect for my sky. So now I need to create the grass portion of the card, and I've taken this piece of green paper from the paper pad, and I've cut that first using my rectangle stitch dies so that it's got the same base as the rest of my card will have. And now I'm just going to run this grass border through my die cutting machine. Now you can see here that I've had a couple of failed attempts. This is not the die's fault, this is the fault of my die cutting machine. The center B plate there is very warped, and it just means that sometimes I don't get the right cut first time, and if I've already taken my die away then I can't run it through again. So that did take a couple of attempts, but I've got my first piece of grass, and I'm just using some distress ink just to add a little bit of dimension around the edges. I've cut two of these pieces, one slightly bigger than the other, and I felt that my first use of Distress Oxide, which was the Twisted Citron I believe, just wasn't dark enough. So I've gone in over the top with some bundled sage, and this gave a much better look, a bit more dimension. It looked really great against that really vibrant green, and just gave a little bit more of interest. So those two will layer up eventually. But I put them to one side, and now I'm moving on to my stencil. Now on the Wonderful Waves Stencil there are these really cute cloud stencils, and I'm using the smallest of these to create some clouds in the background. So before I do my stamp through that stencil, I've just applied some anti-static to my background, and then I'm using some of this Versamark ink to stamp directly through that that cloud shape. And I've done that in 2 areas, and one that goes a little bit off the page, just so that creates the illusion that the sky will continue past the card. And where there's been a little bit of that Versamark that's gone onto my background, I've then just used a paintbrush to remove that excess. And applying some heat, and you can see how that transforms the white powder into this lovely glossy bit of cloud. I really love this effect, and I do this quite a lot now. It's a really fun way of using your stencils slightly differently. So the background panel then will use that first bit, that largest piece of grass, and I was just lining that up to make sure that it all worked and was in proportion. So the next stage then is on the piece of cardstock that doesn't have my clouds on. I'm going to use that as the outer portion and frame for my shaker card, and I've used a frame from the Mama Elephant Hugs, I believe it's called, die set to create my frame. Like I said, the larger of my grassy floor portions, if you like, has gone onto my background panel, and now my frame, I'm just applying some tape runner to that so that I can apply my acetate, which I've already cut to size. Using my anti-static pad there just to remove any static or whatever static I can from that piece of acetate. That it does still have a little bit of static to it, but I think that's inevitable really. But this does really help. I think it would have been an awful lot worse if I hadn't done that. So now I'm applying some shaker tape. This is quite thick shaker tape, but I do need 2 layers of that. So I've just sped through that process for you because it's quite dull watching somebody apply shaker tape. But yes, normally I would have folded my shaker tape in half rather than doing it this way, but I did actually forget that I needed 2 layers of the tape to create enough dimension for my sequins once they're in the shaker for them to move around freely. So that's just a little tip to remember there. Don't do what I did. So I've applied all of my tape now onto the back, but I haven't removed the backing. So again, I'm just using some little bits of the anti-static powder that come off that little the little pad there with a brush to go around the inside of my shaker tape to remove any stickiness that there might be, and this will just help if any of my little elements want to try and stick to the side of the card. It's not perfect by any means, because some of these elements are very, very small, and as you can see here, as I'm popping them inside the center of my my shaker, they are going everywhere, and there was glitter and bits all over my work surface, and it took me ages to clean that up. I've got some stuck to my fingers. They were sticking to the bits of shaker tape as I was removing it. It was a whole mess, but it was fun, and it looks great when it's done. So it's worth all of the fuss. So there you can see it's just sticking to my tape there. A few bits wanted to escape, so I'm just using my poker tool to remove those. And then I did just need to check that I'd got that the right way up, that my seam was the right way around, and so that my the portion of my frame where it's blank at the bottom was the same end as my grass, because I'm now going to cover that portion with the smaller piece of grass. My first step though was to apply some liquid glue to my little girl so that I could position her behind where the grass will be, and I've just applied liquid glue directly to the back of that, and once I'd done that I realised that there were some gaps behind my my images there, and I've coloured those in greens just so that they match the background, the green of the grass in the background. I felt that the white spaces just looked a little bit odd. And applying that same liquid glue now to the smaller grass portion, popping that on the bottom of my frame there, and that means that that part was completed. Now, I forgot to turn my camera back on when I moved on to my sentiment, so I'm just showing you here that I've used one of the border dies that's from the Time for Tea Best Fishes banner and border die set, and this particular banner cuts out two pieces, the outer stitched edge and the centre portion, which means that you can mix and match that. So I've done that with green cardstock on the outside, and then having printed out my sentiment, cut that out in just plain white cardstock for the centre, and I did that with some foam pads. So now I'm going to stamp a sentiment onto the inside of my card, and I'm using the sentiment Have a Perfect Day from the Time for Tea Designs Mew R Pawsome stamp set. I'm using some Salty Ocean Distress Oxide ink to stamp my sentiment, and then I'm also going to use one of the paw print stamps from that same set with some Twisted Citron, and just doing some first and second generation stamping all around my sentiment with those two different colours, just to add a little bit of decoration on the inside. I think it's nice to continue the theme from the outside of your card onto the inside, and it's sometimes an area that is forgotten, certainly by me anyway, so I have made a commitment to do more stamping on the inside of my cards in the future. So this is a top folding card, an A2 size, and I've just applied some liquid glue there, which will help me position the panel for my shaker card onto that base. And now I can add my finishing touches. So I'm just using some glossy accents that I've dispensed into this tube here, which has got a really fine tip on it, which allows me to apply the glossy accents to really small images. It's a great little bit of kit, and I've just applied that to the wings of my butterflies, to the noses of all of the cats, and then to my fish. And finally, I felt that the bottom part of the card needed a bit of extra decoration, so I'm using some of the same sequins that I've used in the shaker to add to that like little flowers, little sequiny flowers in the bottom of the card, and that's the card complete. And you can see the shake there, all of those sequins moving around in the background. Some of them have stuck to some of the background image, but it's just added a little bit of shimmer, and actually I really like that look. So I really hope that you like the card today, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video. If you do, it'd be great if you could like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back again with more videos in the future. Thank you. Bye bye now.